Hello, my name is Annika, and today I want to cover the basics of genetics and human behavior. Genetics and human behavior, also known as behavioral genetics, is a field in which scientists study the interaction between genes and the environment, which works to explain many different traits, diseases, and aspects of our personality. So first, I kind of want to go over genetics before going into behavioral genetics. In our body, genes determine our traits. Humans have 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs of chromosomes, as shown in the karyotype above. We get 23 chromosomes from our mother and 23 chromosomes from our father. There are thousands of genes that are located on these 46 chromosomes. Now, pairs of genes code for the same specific phenotypes or traits, but will have variations between them, which are known as alleles. Now, in this picture, you see the same gene on both of these chromosomes, but they have different alleles. One gene codes for the allele for purple flowers, and the other codes for white flowers. Based on the dominance or recessive quality of the alleles, some traits will be expressed, whereas others will be suppressed. So if it's dominant, it will be shown, whereas if it's recessive, it will be hidden. Now, most people know about the physical traits that our genes will code for. For example, eye color, as shown in the picture, height, and also hair color. These are commonly taught in school biology classes. But what about traits for personality? What about traits for complex afflictions like PTSD or obesity? These also have genetic influences. Now, we commonly believe that such disorders are caused solely by the environment. PTSD is caused by soldiers becoming traumatized by war experiences, and obesity is caused because people cannot control themselves and they overeat. However, it has been found that there are genetic influences that impact each of these disorders. Now, there are two different types of relationships that have been established between genes and the environment. The two types are gene-environment interaction and gene-environment correlation. So first, we're going to talk about gene-environment interaction. So gene-environment interaction states that the environment you live in can change the way your genes are expressed. So environment changes genes. For example, if you sit inside, eat unhealthy, and have poor posture, you will not grow tall. However, if you eat healthy, remain active, and always have good posture, you will grow taller. In the first example, where you're sitting inside, eating unhealthily, your genes might say that you can grow tall, but due to your environment, you will not. Genetic predisposition is able to be altered based on the environment. This relationship, gene-environment interaction, places a stronger emphasis on the environment. So, strong, I'm just going to abbreviate emphasis on environment. Instead of placing an emphasis on the genes. This relationship is also proven by illnesses such as depression, Alzheimer's, and autism. Many people can have a predisposition for such diseases, but the disease is only triggered when the individual is placed in a specific environment. So unless they encounter that environment, they won't even have the specific disease that they have a predisposition for. Oh, and that's just a silly picture on the side. Now, gene-environment correlation is essentially the opposite of gene-environment interaction. Gene-environment correlation states that a person's genotype may affect the environment they find themselves in. So essentially, genes affect environment. Now, there are three subcategories of gene-environment correlation: passive, active, and evocative. So in passive gene-environment correlation, the environment is already present. So your environment is inherited. So your parents' genes cause them to create a particular environment, and you are getting their genes, and as well as that, you're getting their environment that they have already created. So essentially, you're born into your environment. Now, active gene-environment correlation means that due to the specific gene you have, you seek out the environment yourself. So, seek out environment, I'm just going to abbreviate that, due to genetics. Ooh, let me just rewrite that. So an example would be individuals who are normally extroverted may seek out a different social environment than those people who are shy and introverted. Now, evocative gene-environment correlation is when your genes cause you to have behaviors that change the environment. So, genetics creates behavior which changes environment. Just gonna repeat that. So, for example, if you are rude and grumpy all the time, your environment changes as people respond to you in a more negative way due to your behavior. Now, if you're happy and always polite, then your environment changes because people respect you and are polite back. So, it's your own genetics which causes your behavior, which will change your environment. Now, you might be wondering how this can all be proven, and it seems kind of unreliable if you ask people for self-reports, because self-reports, essentially people answer in the way they want to see themselves, not necessarily the way they act. So, there are ways that actually these experiments have been proven through twin studies and adoption studies. So, in twin studies, identical twins, which are also known as monozygotic twins are taken, and also fraternal twins or dizygotic twins, they're both taken and they are observed. So identical twins, their DNA matches 100% as they are identical. And so when you look at identical twins, you can tell if their behaviors are based on their genetics or their environment. If their behavior is based on their genetics, they both will essentially act in the same way. However, if their behavior is based on the environment, they'll act differently depending on their friend group, their social life, etc. Now, dizygotic twins, their DNA is 50% the same. So, this way, you can see whether environment plays a greater role, because they both are in the same environment, the same parents and everything, and you can test what your experiment on the identical twins are. You can test on fraternal twins to make sure that you understand whether it's genetic or environmental. It's the same idea. Now, you can also conduct adoption studies. So, for adoption studies, these are a little bit harder because you have to figure out the child's biological parents, you have to be in touch with them, and also their environmental parents. So, this is a very effective way to tell whether it's genetics or environment, because you can look at the biological parents' traits. So let me just write bio here. You can look at their traits, and then look at your environmental parent traits. Now, if the trait that is being expressed in the child is 100% genetic, then the biological parents will also exhibit the same traits. If that trait is influenced greatly by the environment, then the environmental parents will show the same trait. So adoption studies are very, very useful because they accurately tell you whether a trait is mostly genetic or mostly environmental. But the only problem is that even in twin studies, finding these pairs and finding these adopted children that you can talk to and figure out and experiment with is difficult because you may not always be in touch with the biological parents, or you might not always find a great number of identical and fraternal twins. Now, you can have your genes tested, and I won't go into too much detail, but there are places where you can get your genes tested, and you can essentially find out what your genes will predict for you and what traits or illnesses you might have in your future. Now, this is another interesting website that I just put the logo up for, where you can actually send your DNA, I think it's saliva, but I'm not 100% sure, and they will analyze your DNA and send you the raw copy, except it looks like this. It's not 100% analyzed, so you have to go to a geneticist to get it analyzed. I would say, however, in terms of genetic testing, just keep in mind that genes are not destiny. So if you decide to get genetically tested, just keep in mind that your genes are not your destiny. Just because it predicts that you will have something does not necessarily mean that you are destined to get it. Now on to the final topic, why behavioral genetics matters at all. Why do we even bother to look at this? And I think the most important reason is the social stigma that lies around many, many afflictions and disorders. Like in this image, anorexia, being OCD, being called psycho, alcoholic. So now, after looking at a little bit at behavioral genetics, like obesity, alcohol dependency, aggression, antisocial behaviors, sexuality, these all have genetic influences. So you cannot look at someone who's obese or alcohol dependent and say, oh, you chose to be this way. This is all your fault. You do have to keep in mind that genes, as well as their environment, I'm going to abbreviate that, play a huge role. So society has created this image of a perfect person, and if you don't meet it, there's a stigma. So exploring behavioral genetics into depth and educating people about behavioral genetics is really helpful in terms of reducing and maybe even eradicating the stigma. And it's another step closer to equality and treating everyone as equal and treating everyone the same way. And I feel like these pictures are powerful in showing the social stigma, which is why this is really, really important. So finally, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something new. I mean, I recently learned about this topic, and it's really fascinating. So if you have enjoyed this topic and you think it's something you like, please explore more into it. This is definitely not the whole entire topic. It's just hitting the surface. And instead of being team nature or team nurture, we should all ask, why not both?